Good morning. We are back out in the Susquehannock State Forest for their annual habitat tour today. In this video, we'll hear from Ben from the Elk County Visitors Center give a very informative talk on Pennsylvania elk. And we have a couple of special guests show up right on cue.
Kind of did. I mean, Eric, I was here the other day and Eric said, I think this is where we'll have you talk about elk. We've got some good elk habitat here planted on this pipeline. And he said, often I see elk here. So he was right. I will say, it's kind of, we're lucky though, it's 12:20. Typically you don't see elk midday. Typically it's first hour of daylight, last hour of daylight, just like deer. They're crepuscular, most active in the morning and in the evening. But anyways, I'm gonna give you just a little bit of overview on elk history. The elk in Pennsylvania were native, okay? So if we were to go back 500 years ago, there were lots of elk in Pennsylvania. They were not Rocky Mountain elk. These are Rocky Mountain elk. They were brought here about 100 years ago from South Dakota, Wyoming, and Colorado. Okay, prior to that, it was eastern woodland elk. Eastern woodland elk at one time pretty much covered the Appalachian Mountain chain all the way from Maine down to Georgia. Due to habitat loss and overhunting, the eastern woodland elk was extirpated, eliminated, removed, whatever you want to say, in the 1860s. The last eastern woodland elk was killed in Elk County, Pennsylvania, and that was the last eastern woodland elk, period, on Earth, okay? So that's how Elk County got its name. When the Pennsylvania Game Commission was established in 1895, one of their very first goals was to bring elk back to Pennsylvania because they were a native species here. So they went out west, live trapped 177 Rocky Mountain elk in those three states. They brought them back to Pennsylvania and they released them, in 10 different locations. Here's the cool part, at least I find it very fascinating. They only survived in Elk and Cameron counties. So, it's pretty unique to think, okay, so the last eastern woodland elk lived in Elk County, and when they did when they reintroduced them, the only place they survived was in Elk and Cameron County. So the question is why? It's not just by chance. It's habitat, it's lack of people. These are big critters. Those two bulls right there, they are bulls. They don't have, well, unless you have really good eyesight, you can see they have about 6 inches of new growth. They're probably three-year-old bulls. I'm just guessing that by the looks of their bodies, okay? They're probably eating right now somewhere between 10 and 20 pounds a day. What I'm telling you is you can't have elk everywhere you have deer. I always tell people, there's a lot of deer down in Allegheny County around Pittsburgh. Put an elk down there, it's not going to survive. It's not because it wouldn't be able to survive, it's because people won't allow it. These things eat a lot, they're very destructive, they cover a lot of ground. Deer's home range, 3 to 4 square miles. Elk's home range up to 25 square miles. Okay? Deer eat on average 3 pounds a day. These things on average eat 12 pounds a day, weighing up to 900 pounds. Emporium, Cameron County, they have a really nice golf course surrounded by electric fence. That's for elk. You get one of these things to walk across a putting green. It puts 4-inch divots in the putting green. It costs $10,000 to resurface a putting green. I know that because I've gotten phone calls from Mike Kiefer there at the golf course saying, get these elk off the golf course. So anyways, these 177 elk that were reintroduced into Pennsylvania 100 years ago, we now have about 1,500 elk in Pennsylvania, and that population is growing, and they are spreading out. So a lot of people think about Elk County, they think about elk, they think about Benezet at the Elk Country Visitors Center. Here we are. We're an hour and a half away from Benezet. I can't get there quicker from here. That's the fastest route, hour and a half from Benezet. There's elk here, and there's not just two. There's a lot of elk in Susquehannock Forest, okay? And there's going to be more elk in Susquehannock Forest 5 years from now. There are elk now in 10 counties in Pennsylvania. The elk range in Pennsylvania is about 1,000 square miles, and it's growing. So they're mainly spreading to the east and to the north, and that is by design. 80% of the elk range is public lands. You know, I learned something just the other day from Mark and Eric that really, took what I already knew and put things in better perspective. They said Sproul State Forest is the biggest state forest in Pennsylvania. How many acres did you tell me? 310,000. 310,000 acres, Sproul State Forest, okay? It's full of elk. It borders Susquehannock State Forest. 250,000 acres? Okay. Guess what? Elk State Forest is the third largest state forest in the state. How many acres?
Is it 230? Yeah. It's like 230-ish, I think.
Do the math. Right there we have 800,000 acres of public land that is prime habitat for elk and other wildlife. Okay? That is why elk are in this part of the state. That is why they're doing well. That's why it has been a successful reintroduction of a wildlife species. And you're just going to continue to see, them thrive. Right now we're in Hunt Zone 14. Something I forgot to bring to put into your folders. In your folders you have a couple things that I gave Eric the other day. But I brought these today, and you can just pass them out. This is the elk hunting brochure the Pennsylvania Game Commission puts out. And what I like about this, and the reason I brought it today, is this shows you the hunt zones. Okay? This is hunt zone 14 right here. It is the largest hunt zone of all 14 hunt zones. This year there's 13 elk tags in hunt zone 14. Last year there were 13 elk tags in hunt zone 14. I know I'm going to get asked the question, so I'm just going to tell you. How many elk were killed last year in hunt zone 14 of the 13 tags? 10. There were 3 cow tags that weren't filled during the general season. Now, somebody could say, well, why is that? My answer would be, it's hunting. You don't know, maybe one of those hunters didn't hunt very hard. Maybe one of those hunters didn't hunt at all. Or maybe, one of those hunters, just was unlucky. But I will tell you this. If you get an elk hunting tag in Pennsylvania, you're in business. The hard part is getting the tag. This year there's 140 elk tags in Pennsylvania total. Last year there were 130,000 applicants for those 140 elk tags. Okay? Don't throw tomatoes, but yes, I drew a tag 5 years ago. And I killed a tremendous bull. That was over in Zone 1. So I want to talk a little bit about Zone 1. You're going to see, I might as well get these going around. You're going to see on here that Zone 1 borders the elk range to the west and to the south. That is by design. That is to keep the elk from going west and south. Why doesn't the Pennsylvania Game Commission want the elk going west and south? Anybody?
Too much population.
Too many people, and with that, too much private ground. Okay? So if you are a hunter and you draw a tag in Zone 3, you can hunt Zone 3 and Zone 1. If you're a hunter and you draw Zone 10 you can hunt zone 10 and zone 1. So 1 is open to anybody that draws an elk tag. So that does a pretty good job. I call it the border zone. An elk gets into zone 1, it's fair game for anybody with an elk tag. So I drew zone 5 years ago. I killed my bull in zone 1. I killed it clean down by Penfield, which isn't far from Du Bois, which isn't far from Route 80. Okay, pretty much Route 80 is going to be that southern border of the elk range. Now, I will also tell you this. The Pennsylvania Game Commission is remapping the elk zones for next year. There is going to be no zone 1. Now, there's talk of making it so that if you are a hunter, some of you guys are going to like this. I see it could be a potential problem, but I don't work for the Game Commission. What they're talking about doing is having no border zone, no zone 1. And if you are a hunter and you see an elk outside of the elk management area, you can shoot it. We'll see how that works.
Well, sorry, I missed that again. So basically, zone 1 is no longer, but if you
They're talking about doing away with zone 1 next year. They are reconfiguring the zones. And they're talking about allowing hunters to shoot an elk outside of the elk management area if they see one. My concern with that, and I already voiced it, there are people that will get together a crew. Bingo.
Are you saying without a tag?
You'll have to buy a tag. It will be separate.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
That'll be terrible.
That's my thoughts.
Yeah,
But anyways, you know, our herd in Pennsylvania is doing very well. Yes, they're members of the deer family, more or less cousins with deer. We also have, of course, moose and caribou. And the herd is doing very well, and they are Rocky Mountain elk. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about that too, because here we are, we're 100 years later from this reintroduction. I guarantee if we were to take one of these Rocky Mountain elk that have been here for 100 years, because there have not been any reintroductions of elk in Pennsylvania since 1926. Okay? Now, some of you locals are probably thinking, oh yeah, they brought elk into Clinton County down here, bottom, you know, what was that called down there? Yeah, down there at the bottom of, what is it, Cook's? The bottom of Cook's Run, that area there. That was in 1998. They did a trap and transfer project, okay? They trapped some live elk up in Elk and Cameron County, and they brought them down here at the bottom of Kettle Creek drainage, and they released them, okay? And that was in 98. And yes, it was very successful, and that is one of the reasons why there are elk now in this area. I will also tell you the elk are coming here from many different routes. You know, if you're familiar with East Fork, which runs down towards Austin, you know, down towards Wharton, they are certainly coming up that drainage. They're also coming right over the ridge from Cinnamahoney area. They're also coming up, you know, more or less the Kettle Creek drainage off of 120. So the elk are getting into this area from a lot of different ways. And what you're typically going to see with these elk expanding their range, first it's going to be the bulls typically. So those of you that live around Coudersport, you know a couple years ago, it was during the rut, it was in the fall, there were a couple young bulls in the Coudersport Hospital lawn. Why? Well, because they're young bulls, it was the rut, they weren't getting any action where the cows are, so what do? They push the outer limits, they're more or less cruising for females, okay? that's what you see. The younger bulls push the outer limits first. Typically, within 5 years, you see other elk moving into those areas. I mean, I will tell you where I live between St. Mary's and Emporium. And north of 120, between St. Mary's and Emporium, 10 years ago, there really were no elk. Okay? I'm seeing more and more and more elk in that area. First it was the bulls, and then followed by the cows. At first it was just the bulls during the rut that were getting pushed out. Now there's cows there year round. And the other thing is habitat, everybody. So these pipelines, this is an interstate for elk. So for elk to travel, these pipelines are great, especially if they're planted like this.
Mike was going to try to sneak around and take a picture of them, and then you talk.
Oh, gotcha. I was gonna say there's something there.
Yeah.
He's got scared. No, that one guy went down.
But anyways, that's elk in a nutshell. This is a habitat tour, so I'd like to talk about habitat a little bit. Here we see, this has been planted. There's a lot of clover here. Thank you. Clover is a forb, small flowering plant. Elk love to eat it. It's very beneficial. Elk are grazers. 80% of their diet is going to be green plants. In the winter months, there's not a lot of green grass. They become more of a browser. Like I said, they eat a lot of bark. You're looking at aspen, willow, maple, devil's club, believe it or not, witch hazel are some of their favorite barks to eat. Okay? But, somebody mentioned earlier about, I forget who it was, but about them cutting, right here is this fella, about them cutting these pipelines. And yes, you're right. It would be beneficial to elk and deer and turkey and bear. It's amazing how much grass in the springtime the bear eat. We would be getting a lot better regeneration if they were cut once or twice a year. I know Eric said that he planted this right here this past year.
No, this has been this will be going on its third year.
Okay. So you see here, there's a lot of clover in here, and if you cut it once a year, twice a year is even better. You get a lot of, regen, and you're able to have a good clover stand for 3 or 4 years. Seed costs money. Lime, fertilizer costs money. But if nothing else, just cutting of these openings is going to benefit elk and other wildlife. But anyways, our elk herd in Pennsylvania is doing extremely well. Our organization, being a nonprofit for wildlife, our number one priority is education. Secondly, it's habitat enhancement for elk. So last year we did over 500 acres of elk habitat for the elk within the elk range. I know that in the past we've provided some dollars for Susquehannock State Forest for equipment, and I know that we're going to be doing some more habitat work hopefully in the future.
Seed, lime, and fertilizer too in the past. You guys have provided money for as well.
The other thing that I should mention is, being a nonprofit, we can also do habitat work on private land. So a lot of the habitat work that we're doing for elk is also on private land. It's not just public land. So if you are somebody that has, acreage, and you're interested in habitat work for elk and other wildlife, reach out to us, and we might be able to help you out either doing the work. We have a couple big tractors and we have the equipment. We just got a no-till drill. We've got some equipment, and we actually have done quite a bit of habitat work down around Leidy and up at Tamarack.
These lines right here, that's where they lead to, is the Leidy, right in that direction. That's where Leidy is.
There you go. Yeah, I think there's 5 or 6 plots down around Leidy that we've enhanced over the past 5 or 6 years. But does anybody have any questions on the elk herd or on elk habitat or on, anything as far as elk hunting, elk history?